Hey amigos, Faxinaru here from Ocean Swift Synthesis. In this video, I would like to take a look at our Pathfinder Wavetable Synth for Kontakt 6 and Kontakt 6 Player. It is a full NKS instrument within Native Instruments NKS environment. We'll take a look at that in a second. Just like to mention that this video is a developer commentary. Just want to talk a little bit about this device. If you want to hear audio examples, if you want to watch videos of this device in action, just look at the website, www.oceanswift.net, and you can find all the info and all the sound examples and everything. So this video is just going to be me just talking a little bit about the functions of this synth and just a little bit about it. So if this is boring for you, then just check out all the sound examples and everything else on our website. So let's go. So as I mentioned just in the beginning of this video, this is a wavetable synth for Kontakt and Kontakt 6 Player. So here I'm opening it in Kontakt itself, in the full version of Kontakt. It is open in Maschine Studio over on this computer. This is by no means a must. You can open it as a regular VST plugin, just in any DAW, just using Kontakt 6 Player, which you don't need to really buy. The player is free from Native Instruments, so all you need to buy is basically our device. You don't need to buy Kontakt itself. We do encourage you to have a look at it because it's, we think Kontakt is an amazing environment. So assuming you opened it in the player or in the full Kontakt, you can open it, as I said, in any VST environment. Here I opened it in Maschine. I would just want to show you a little bit, just that we have so many presets in this device. Let's just take a look at that for a second. All instruments. No, let's go to. Oh no, where did it go? Oh, okay, I clicked the user. I'm sorry. So all instruments. If we go to, I don't have a lot in here, so I have Pathfinder installed on this computer. We actually have 3 sub-banks. Why is it not showing? Okay, there we go. So there's a sub-bank from Brent Malik, Collision, one of our friends and beta testers. There's some presets from him, and as you can see, everything is tagged as per the NKS standard. So you can really get into whatever sounds you want. Going through the sub-banks, another one from Tom Wolf, and a lot of factory presets. If you close the sub-bank tab, then you can browse through all the presets of the synth, and as you can see, there are a ton of them. There's over 300, I think close to 350, something like that. Tons of presets. All of them are tagged very nicely, you know, for the NKS environment. You can go to, you know, all the subcategories and everything. So that's for the presets themselves. I encourage you to have a look. There's tons of good stuff. We always pride ourselves in providing lots of good presets for our synths. So for the synth itself, this is actually pretty interesting what we did here, I think, because in the kind of Native Instruments paradigm of doing things, this would actually maybe be more of a kind of something you would develop in Reactor, but we went for the developing it in Kontakt because of the great new wavetable synthesis functions available in Kontakt 6. And we are actually the very first developer to make use of this wavetable. So what am I talking about here? As you can see, this looks like really like a classic synthesizer, right? It doesn't really look like a sampler, and this is actually what it is. It is a synthesizer within the sampler paradigm of Kontakt. So we have 2 oscillators, just like a classic synth. Everything here actually that you see, you know, the controls are really classic. There's no menuing and stuff like that. Kind of looks almost kind of like an analog synth type of GUI design, right? So 2 oscillators. They are both wavetable oscillators. By default, they are both loaded with our wavetables. You can load other wavetables of your own if you want. Our wavetables include actually lots of different full tables, and they are different types. Some of them are morphing types, and some of them are multi sort of wavetable types. If you go, for example, to path 1, this has all sorts of shapes, you know, like this is more of a like a saw shape, and something, you know, it's like a saw a little bit bent over here, and all sorts of different shapes. You know, in the beginning there's, I think there's like a triangle and all sorts of stuff here. Actually, I don't really remember what each one was, on every single spot, but the idea is that some of them, like path 1 over here, contain multiple sorts of types of wave shapes inside the wavetable. Already, each one of them is 100, so this path 1 guy already gives you 100 tables. If you go to path number 2, again you have 100 unique tables. All these guys are not available on path 1, so already path 1, path 2, that's 200. Here we have all sorts of wavetables we call adds. It's made from additive synthesis types. This is all sorts of bent sorts of wave shapes. This is captured from all sorts of incoming audio, all sorts of wave shapes. Then you get down to the morphing types, and as you can, if you look, let's look back at the path, you see there's, like I said, many different wave shapes, static wave shapes. If you go to something like this guy, the magic over here, this is called a morphing table. As you can see, if I go from wave number 1 over here, if I start, it's the same wave shape in each cycle, but with different modulation going on. And you can actually really see how it's really morphing, if you move this really quickly. So instead of you moving this really quickly, which you can automate this knob if you want, but you also have down here a Morph Lfo. We'll get into the LFO functionality in a second, but as you can see, you can increase the depth over here, and this will sway the wavetable based on the LFO over here. The basic controls for the oscillator are over here, semi, fine, and glide. One more thing for the wavetable is that in addition to having all these shapes available to you, morphing and non-morphing shapes, you also have over here wavetable controls, which allows you to kind of wave shape the wavetable additionally. If it's on bypass, this thing will not do anything at all. But if you start to go, you can get like pulse width modulation on the table. You can get all sorts of wave shaping going on that will really transform, your tables and the sound. This is really interesting to play with, I think. Whoop, really nice. So as you can see, with like 100 shapes on each slot, and then the morphing guys and the shaping over here, this is already a ton that you can do, right? Especially considering that you have 2 of these guys over here. Each wavetable also has a start phase function, and this actually shows over here, and a phase random, which actually means that on every new MIDI note, there will be a little bit of randomization to the start phase. And this is actually really useful if you turn on the unison and you use some phase randomization. So this kind of makes it so every single one of the unison voices will start on a bit of a different phase, and the unison is just much more beautiful that way. It's much less, with a harsh attack, that characteristic kind of bad unison sound. So you get a good unison sound by adding some randomness to the start phase. Just try it out yourself. And then down here are the modulation controls. I already showed you the morph depth control. And here you have the envelope depth, which is a pitch envelope. This is this guy over here. And the pitch LFO depth, which is this guy over here. And the gain of the oscillator, really basic stuff. So this is the OSC A, this is OSC B, exactly identical oscillators. So I mentioned the envelope down over here. Just your normal ADSR envelope. Take into account that we purposely left the envelopes. You have really a huge range on these envelopes. So the decay goes up to something like 15 seconds. The attack can go up to 25 seconds, and the release can go up to 25 seconds on all of the envelopes. I'll mention this again on the amp envelope in a second. So this is the pitch envelope. As you can see, you have something a little bit unique, I think, over here, which we call velocity decay. It just means that the incoming MIDI velocity is mapped to the decay, to modulate the decay knob over here. So let's say you have it on set to high all the way. So a high velocity will actually, let's say, and this is your decay, so a high velocity will kind of maybe play it over here, and the low velocity will modulate it so the decay will be just a little bit lower. So it's kind of interesting way to modulate your pitch envelope, or basically, well, not the amp envelope, but the pitch envelope and our filter envelopes over here, using some decay. So that's the pitch envelope. Down here is the pitch LFO. I will talk about just this LFO because all the other LFOs are basically the same. So this guy over here modulates the pitch of both of these oscillators, and you have your standard wave shapes, analog style wave shapes, you know, sine, tri, saw, square, and random, which is a sample and hold. You can re-trigger the LFO with each new incoming MIDI note, and you can of course control the rate, and as you can see, this goes all the way up into the audio rate, okay, on all these LFOs. So you can go up to 213 hertz on this guy over here for the pitch, which means that everything basically above, you know, something like 20 hertz, this whole range over here is already audio rate, so it's basically FM, right? Because let's say you're using a sine to modulate the frequency of this guy, you're basically doing FM modulation. So it's a pitch LFO, and there's no dedicated FM area on the synth, but the pitch LFO pretty much gives you a way of doing some FM on the synth as well. You can fade the LFO in, which means that with each new MIDI note, the LFO will kind of increase up to the maximum set over here. And you can keyboard track the LFO, which means that, again, same that we mentioned over here with the velocity decay on the envelopes, the keyboard tracking will track the keyboard notes. So if you play a high note, let's say it's open, so if you play, let's say, a higher note, then, and your pitch is over here, then maybe it will play a little bit something like this. And if you play a lower note, maybe it'll play a little bit something like this. So if you play a 3-note chord, for example, then you get a little bit of variation between the LFOs of each one of the notes in the chord. So this is really, really interesting. Of course, something to keep in mind is if you sync the LFO over here, so let's say you have it on 1/16th, and you obviously, now it will be synced, right, with no keyboard tracking. But if you use some keyboard tracking, then of course it will, the basis will be 1/16th, but each note will actually not really hit the exact sync of 1/16th, because you're adding or subtracting from this synced 1/16th based on your keyboard notes. Just keep that in mind. Maybe you want that. So that's it for the envelopes and the LFOs. Show the amp envelope, but there's basically not much to mention, except that, again, these are really, really long envelope times. So you can go up to 15 seconds, up to 25 seconds over here, and up to 25 seconds over here. Now, this is crucial on the amp envelope, because as long as a note is held, you know, it'll still affect the CPU. So if you have an amp envelope like really long over here, let's say this is something like 20 seconds, right? So, and you're playing notes, all sorts of notes, and every single note is being held for 20 seconds, and you know, you can start playing around your little melody, and really quickly you'll have stacked tons of notes. So just keep that in mind, you know. We want to allow you to make really long and droning and sort of soundscapey sounds, but also we want you to be aware of this, so your CPU doesn't go crazy, especially when you're using this high release together with unison, which basically multiplies your voice, multiplies and detunes each and every one of your voices. If you turn it on, you can turn it on and turn it off completely. Let's say you put it on 5 voices, so every single hit on the keyboard will actually trigger 5 voices, and you can detune them and spread them in the stereo picture. Again, this can be really beautiful with some phase randomization on each one of the oscillators. But just keep track of the amp release over here and the voices you're using in unison. If you're getting a really high CPU, this is probably the reason, some combination of these two guys over here. Here you have just the basic keyboard bend for the pitch bend, you know, the bend range. Something we like to do on some of our synths, you have an HP high pass filter on the entire output. This is really, really a mild filter, somewhere between 20 to 40 hertz. If you turn it on, this will kind of clean all your ultra lows from your sound, any sort of DC artifacting from, you know, FM and all sorts of crazy stuff you might be doing with your wavetables. So this will kind of clean the ultra lows, give you a really, really nice sound. And it's actually even useful sometimes for bass lines, because it will take away the really, really low frequencies that are kind of and kind of bring out, you know, the actual bass frequencies that you want to use. So just play with it. If you feel that you're missing some fatness, you know, you're welcome to turn it off. If you feel that it gives you a better sound, you're welcome to turn it on. You know, it's just another option, okay? And we talked about the Morph Lfo already. So let's go to the second page. So this is the oscillator page, filter page, and we have an effects page. So to go to the filter page, again, same as the oscillator idea, where you had two oscillators, you have two filters in series. The oscillators are mixed together, okay, so both oscillators are mixed, and then go to filter A together, and then to filter B together. The first thing to note on the filters, again, both sides here are identical. So let's talk about one side. You can bypass the filters entirely. You know, so let's say you want to use just one filter there, then you can, you know, bypass filter B or bypass whichever one of them. You know, if you bypass this guy, you can then use this guy. Let's say you bypass filter B and then use whatever you want in filter A. That's also an option for you. One thing to notice, we have distortion, which is part of the filter circuit over here. And this distortion, tube distortion, is inactive if the filter is on bypass over here. So if you're moving this knob around and it's not doing anything, it's because your filter is bypassed altogether. So the filter shapes themselves, the filter types themselves are all the types that you can basically use in Kontakt. Valve filters, phase, you know, you only have your normal stuff, but you also have some interesting stuff. The valve filters, phaser, sort of a phasing filter, notch filtering over here, and then you have all the cool, you know, low pass, you know, two-pole types, interesting three-pole, the classic Pro 52 type that from Native Instruments, all the cool Native Instruments filters on each one of these. And then you have your standard controls, you know, cutoff, resonance, envelope, amount, keyboard tracking for the cutoff knob, and modulation amount over here. And the modulators we've seen before for the filter, you know, same as the OSCs over here, same guys. So you have two envelopes, one envelope for each filter. You have the same velocity decay mechanism for the decay over here, and the LFO for each filter down here, and the distortion that I mentioned before just over here. So this is each one of your filter units, very, very powerful. Again, you can use neither, you can use one, you can use both. Get really, really interesting and dynamic sounds. These are really, really powerful, nice sounding filters. Together with the distortions, you can get really grungy and interesting sounds. So the last page is the effects page. We decided to add these effects to kind of give you really a way to sculpt your sound entirely within the synth, you know. Obviously, you can put any other external effects to, you know, along with these guys or instead of these guys, whatever you want to do. One thing cool to note that we've used the latest reverb algorithm from Native Instruments in here. It's one of the new features available in the Kontakt 6 development. So along with the wavetables, you know, this is something new in Kontakt, and the reverb effect is also something new in Kontakt. This is actually a really interesting reverb because, as you can see, it's quite extensive. You know, you have a lot of controls. You have two basic algorithms from a room and a hall. You can turn it on and off, obviously, and then your basic reverb controls. But you have, you know, you have quite everything to mess with over here, from time, pre-delay, room size, width, stereo width, damping inside the reverb itself, but also low pass and high pass of the reverb signal, diffusion, and of course the dry and wet signal. Here, take into account it's not a crossfader as you see on some synths. We decided to give you both the dry and the wet signal. You can mix exactly yourself the ratios of what you want, you know, to output. So the reverb. Also, we have a delay line over here. Delay line, obviously, you know, it's pretty standard stuff. What is interesting over here, you have saturation inside the feedback loop, filtering and saturation. It's kind of standard as well, but the saturation is kind of interesting. And you have modulation inside of the filter itself, inside of the filter feedback. So you can kind of get really interesting. Like you can use it as a standard delay, as a stereo delay, as a ping pong or straight up stereo delay by using this, or you can use it to make all sorts of mod delay effects by using the modulation over here. Really interesting in itself. And again, the delay can, of course, you have feedback over here. The feedback, like our envelopes, is huge. You know, you can even like this. It's already a lot of feedback. We gave you the option to just really go nuts with the feedback. So just be careful and be aware of this, you know. You don't have to put it like on something like this for the feedback to actually be felt and noticed. You know, even something like this gives you some feedback. Play around with it and you will see. This is the delay line synced. You can unsync it. You know, it goes up to pretty much 2 seconds. So, and 1-to-1 on your bar, and you can sync it up to 164th triplets. So reverb, delay, chorus, which is pretty standard, also sounds great. Depth, chorus rate, phase, and the dry wet knob. You have an EQ where it's basically just a kind of like a like a tone EQ. You know, you can choose the basic. This would be pretty much like your cutoff point for your EQ, where in the spectrum, and then how wide would be that cutoff point. You know, it's kind of like it's a bandpass filter, pretty much. You know, think of it that way. So if it's very wide, you know, it'll affect a really large area. So let's say we want to take off, let's say, just this kind of bass mid kind of area over here. We can set it a little bit like this, and then the gain would be something like this, and would kind of make a belly like on an EQ, like a one pole EQ. Okay. And then the Redux, basically it's a sample rate reduction. As you can see, the control itself is called SR. You can really reduce it and make sorts of really bit crushed sample rate crushed effects. And stereo widening. Again, this kind of, it depends really what you want to do. You know, sometimes if you have the chorus, maybe you don't need the stereo widening as well, you know, or if you have it depends, you know, it goes together. Maybe a little bit of stereo widening over here, and you want some delay, or you want you don't want to use the stereo widening over here because you are using something, you know, in the reverb, and you're widening it over here. Gives you another option, especially if you're more using more dry sounds. You know, you're not using reverb, delay, or chorus, but you do want to have a little bit of stereo width. You know, so you can do something like even like this, for example. So these would be all the functions. As you can see, there's no really menuing. The only menuing is that you switch pages from the main pages. Just three distinct main pages. You know, a source section, a filtering section, and the effect section. Really basic. Really simple to wrap your head around it. All your controllers are instantly, you know, in front of you. You don't need to search for anything or go crazy. The only thing, you know, is basically in the menu is the filter types, and you know. Even this is really simple to wrap your head around. And of course the wavetable choices. So this is pretty much the idea of the synth, other than, you know, the sound itself, which we think is amazing. Also the, you know, just all the controls that are available to you. It's really classic. It's really easy to use, and it looks small, right? It's a small little thing on your screen. It's not really intrusive. The graphics are clean and really, you know, colorblind friendly and really accessible and everything. And that's the whole point of the synth, you know. But again, the fact that everything is simple and accessible, this is really powerful, guys, because these two oscillators are really powerful and really extensive, allow for doing a lot of stuff in themselves. The unison and the morphing and everything going on gives a really huge source, and easily modified huge source. The filters, again, really powerful combination, having these two filters and modulators. And of course the lineup of effects really lets you sculpt huge sounds with this relatively simple and not complex to understand device, you know, compared to some other wavetable synths and some other synths of this caliber. This is something that is really fun, really creative, really good for educational purposes, you know, because you can really see everything, really useful. So one last word maybe on the NKS. I've shown, you know, that you can browse the NKS presets and everything, but also I would like to, let's pull this guy just down here for a minute. I want to show you this row over here. So if you have an NKS keyboard, or if you just want to use it in Maschine even without a keyboard, you know, all the parameters are clearly marked over here, you know, in pages. They will load up beautifully on your Komplete Kontrol or Maschine hardware or whatever. Everything is clearly marked. Everything is really smooth and really easy to do, you know. Almost all of the synth controls are on the are mapped to the NKS standard. The first pages are the most useful controls. You know, you can instantly access the oscs and filters if you just, you know, load up any preset. All the presets are NKS compatible that we have added in the synth. So this is Pathfinder WT. One thing I would like to show maybe in the end, if you would like, you can go into the mapping editor, and it's really easy also to replace any of our own wavetables that I've shown you over here in this list. Okay, you can actually replace the tables in this list with your own tables. So what you'd have to do is you would go here, and the odd number groups, so 1, 3, 5, 7, all these guys are the OSC A, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. are OSC B. So let's say you want to replace the path 1, the very first choice on the wavetable menu for OSC A. So all you'd have to do is go here, exchange sample, and load in your own wavetable. We offer extra wavetables for free for sale on our own site. You can load your own wavetables. Our manual also explains how to do this, and also kind of explains what sort of wavetables our device expects, and gives you an idea what you can load into this wavetable. So this is Pathfinder WT. Again, lots of presets, again made with lots of love from us at Ocean Swift Synthesis, and for the price, you know, really much lower than contemporary synths of this caliber, where you get all these options and these types of wavetable synths. You can check around. We offer, we think, a competitive price, great sound, and a great integration with the NKS environment from Native Instruments. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you didn't get too bored. Go to the website, watch some videos for this synths, listen to some of the sounds. See you later. Bye bye.